It was too quiet around the house. Not the friendly silence that felt good, and it made him take notice of those things in the background. The hum from the fridge that sounded so hoarse, and a car hissing its wheels somewhere far off, and simply how one's breathing fills one's space. I shifted into my seat as I flipped page after page within the magazine, but wasn't looking at anything thumbed over every edge out of habit. It wasn't that I was lonely. At least that's what I kept telling myself. My husband was away again. Another business trip. Another week of silence. It had become so routine that I had stopped counting the days. But today, the weight of the empty house pressed against me harder than usual. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. I huffed, putting it down, convincing myself I did not care. And then a noise. The slam of a car door. It was nothing to get panicky over, but out of the ordinary for sure. I leaned forward and peered through the window. He, my husband's nephew, came walking up the drive with his hands tucked in his pockets, striding with an unconscious air that somehow set him apart. I opened the door before he even knocked. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, my voice flat. He flashed a grin. "Uncle asked me to pick up some documents he left behind. Hope I'm not interrupting anything." His presence felt different in this quiet space, like a burst of energy breaking through the stillness. I stepped aside, letting him in. "Not at all. Come in." He walked in, his gaze casually scanning the room as he dropped his bag onto the couch. "Still looks just as nice as I remember," he said, stretching as he looked around. I shrugged. "Nothing's changed." "Maybe that's the problem," he said with a smirk, yet behind the words, something churned. I ignored the comment and waved towards my husband's office. "Go ahead, the documents should be in there." As he vanished down the hall, I blew out a slow breath. It was just a simple visit, nothing more, so why did it feel like something had just shifted? I leaned against the counter, hearing the faint rustling from the office. He was taking his time. Maybe he wasn't in a rush to be off. Maybe I wasn't in such a hurry for him to leave. A second later, he strode in, holding the folder. "Found them," he said, slapping the folder on the palm of one hand. "Your husband needs a better filing system." I smirked. "Tell me about it." Instead of going to the door, he collapsed onto the couch, stretching his arms over the backrest. "You always home alone like this?" His tone was casual, but his eyes held something else. Curiosity, maybe even concern. I hesitated. "He travels a lot. Work?" He nodded very slowly. "Sounds quiet." That was one way to put it, but I wasn't about to spill my thoughts to him. "Must be nice," I said, deflecting. "Your life? No routines? No expectations?" He laughed. "Grass is always greener, right?" Then after a beat, "But yeah, I like my freedom." Something in the sound of his voice made me turn to him. He wasn't making small talk. He was watching me, waiting. Realizing that much unnerved me. I stood quickly. "You should probably get going." His lips curled into a knowing smile. "Yeah, probably." I busied myself in the kitchen, faking that I was cleaning the counter, but still. It felt like he was in the room. He wasn't going to leave. I looked up, and sure enough, there he was, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, staring at me. "You seem different," he said. I let out a forced laugh. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged slightly. "I don't know, you just do." I turned away, shaking my head. "You are imagining things." "Am I?" His tone was even, but something in that evenness got my stomach folding. I needed to end it. "You have what you came for." He exhaled through his nose, pushing himself off the doorway. "Right," but he didn't move toward the door. Instead, he walked past me, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne. I turned sharply. "You, relax," he said, smirking. "I'm just grabbing my bag." I folded my arms, trying to steady my pulse. "Good." He picked up his bag but didn't hurry. Instead, he stood there, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I should have looked away. Instead, I held his stare a moment too long. Neither of us moved. There was tension in the air, as if two words had silently fallen into place. My heartbeat quickened and my body went tight, but I didn't back away. Neither did he. It was one of those moments, inescapable and dangerous. A line that no one speaks of but they both know is there. Then it happened. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even something I thought I'd allow. But there it was, brief, undeniable. My mind screamed at me to stop, to push away, to pretend it never happened. But just for that one split second, nothing else had existed. Then, in less than a beat, reality again slammed into its place. First, I was the one pulling away, breath unsteady and hands trembling. This was a mistake, I whispered. His expression didn't change. No regret, no apology, just understanding, as if he knew this would happen all along. I took another step back, needing distance. You should go. He studied me a second, then gave a slow nod. Yeah. His voice was calm, but there was something final in it. I turned away, grasping the edge of the counter to steady myself. But before I could gather my thoughts, the creaky front door opened behind us. The creaking of the door opening, I turned in time to see his cousin step inside. His eyes darted between us, scanning, the way I was gripping the counter, the way my guest stood too still, too composed. His eyebrows furrowed, and suspicion flashed on his face like a flicker of lightning. "Didn't expect to see you both here," he said, neutral but so full of things unsaid. I forced a smile, too quick, too rehearsed. He was just leaving. "Yeah," the other one added smoothly, reaching for his bag like nothing happened. "Got what I needed." His cousin didn't budge. He looked at the documents, then back at me. "Funny. Uncle asked me to grab those too." For a moment, silence wrapped itself around us like a thick and suffocating blanket. My chest tightened. Had I misjudged? Had we stayed too long? The weight of what almost happened landed on me like a boulder. "Guess I beat you to it," my guest said, his tone easy, but his fingers curled slightly around the strap of his bag. "No harm done." His cousin blew out a harsh breath, shaking his head. "Right." But his eyes lingered a second too long before he turned, pushing the door back open. He was gone without another word. The air inside the house was different now, stale, suffocating. I exhaled, but the tension didn't leave. "Close call," he murmured. I swallowed hard, nodding. Too close. He looked at me for a second, a question in his eyes, but he didn't ask it. Instead, he adjusted his bag, giving me one last unreadable look before stepping outside. I didn't watch him leave. I couldn't. Instead, I turned back to the counter, hands pressed against the cold surface, trying to steady myself. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was regret. Or maybe it was something worse, something I wasn't ready to name. But I did know one thing for sure. This moment, this mistake wouldn't just disappear. It would linger. It would change everything. And deep, deep down, a part of me knew. I'd already crossed a line I couldn't erase.